people think that when you're an agent or you're a spy, you can do anything. You have a right to do, like you are more powerful than the president even.
Yes.
You don't need to ask anyone. You just need to get this thing done. And when I had a conversation with David Omand as well, he also talked about the ethical way of doing spying and like intelligence work. So what's your experience? Because I'm sure, because all of these black sites and all of it, which we hear stories, but then like when you talk to the people like you or other people, they talk like very systematic way of spying as well.
Yes, I know.
But from outside, you're like, what is this?
Really?
Like that's a perception outside.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of talk about ethics in spying. I find ethics very, very difficult because everyone's got a different concept of whatever any ethic is, and therefore it's up and down and around about. I prefer to look at the balance of rights. And I borrow from the European Convention on Human Rights very heavily, or I did certainly in the agencies. In the convention, obviously everybody's given a right to be protected, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom to meet anyone you like and talk and have public protests, right to life. But in all of those freedoms, there's a limitation to protect the national security, the economic well-being of the state in particular, or crime, public health. So one has a good idea that on the one hand, the state has the right not to be interfered with. On the other hand, the state has the right to do that in certain circumstances. So when one comes to make that balance, the necessity and proportionality elements are extremely important. And if one's not prepared to be honest and in one's assessment of that, then things can go off the rails and people can get hurt who shouldn't be hurt. The other thing that's absolutely vital in any intelligence agency operation is the fact there must be independent oversight. And in the Security Service Act and the Act for the SIS and MI6, we introduced parliamentary oversight, where the Committee of Parliamentarians, the Intelligence Oversight Committee, oversees the work, administration, and finances of the intelligence agencies. Now, sorry, keep going.
So just a follow-up question: that is it for like all sorts of operations, or is it like some sort of a category which they overlook? Because again, from the outsider perspective, and in the news, you hear about the black ops and things like that, which you don't ask for the permission from the president or prime minister or like from the parliament. And every intelligence agency is doing these ops. So do you think those come under that act?
Well, black ops are not part of British intelligence.
Do you think that they have never ever done black ops?
That's not in there. If you ask any parliamentarian that question, the agencies know full well that black ops, they're counterproductive. I mean, anyone who tries to do that, I mean, you're going to get a blowback. So black ops are totally out as far as the British intelligence agencies are concerned. Their objective is to either disrupt or preferably to prosecute or to get as much intelligence as you possibly can to inform the government on international policy, economic well-being policy. Black ops don't come into it.
And when you joined, so you joined MI5, starting with MI5 or MI?
Both, MI5 and 6.
So you joined MI5 and MI6 in 1989, which was...
Yeah, 80s. Well, it was it was a bit earlier than that, but yes.
And that was a very interesting time globally because, again, if I look at it from a Pakistani perspective or a South Asian perspective, the Afghanistan was sort of a hub of a war, which just started, I think, at that time, and the Russians and the CIA and the KGB and maybe MI5 and MI6 was also sort of involved in some sort of a way. What are your sort of memories of that war when you joined MI5?
Yes, that I think that was sort of earlier than my time. My time was the upsurge of Irish terrorism on both sides, loyalist and Republican, and the upsurge of international terrorism and the upsurge of organised crime. That was my bailiwick.
And when you joined the services, did they also train you as well? Because obviously when an agent joins, so he need to go through like a proper sort of a training. But you were in a very different position, and that's a new sort of position which they, made for you. So what was your sort of training looks like?
Yeah, I trained with the intelligence agents for 3 months.
Okay.
And not so much that I went out and did steely-eyed things, of course I didn't. My job was to understand their stresses and strains, how they operated, so that when one came to give legal advice, you'd have some understanding as to how they operated. Now, this is an interesting area, actually, because before I went into the agencies, the lawyers were also intelligence officers, and they would swap. One they'd do 2 years as intelligence officer and come back a couple of years as a lawyer. When I got in, I thought, well, no, how can you possibly be unbiased? If you're doing both jobs, you will be much more prone to look after your own intelligence officers than you will to be looking after the law and the human rights that you should be looking after. So we changed that, and all the lawyers were hired as lawyers, and at the same time they all went out and did 3 months with the agents to find out how they did their job, so that they too could understand how to operate with them. I found that incredibly important, because in conducting operations, it's no good the lawyers sitting outside. They had to be with the intelligence agents, but not of them. Does that make sense? So that one could give unbiased advice standing back. But operations were conducted in very close cooperation between the lawyers and the intelligence agents.
And every operation, do you think a lawyer is sort of involved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And in particular, if operations looked as though they had a really good chance of a prosecution being mounted, then the lawyers had an extra job, which was to make sure that the evidence that was presented to the court was sufficient to ensure a successful prosecution, but also as important to make sure that no evidence that might help the defense was held back from them. So therefore operations were very, very carefully crafted so that all the evidence that went before the court would help the prosecution, but there was nothing that could help the defense. And that has always been a massive problem, because when you get to court, all the files of the operation, and I mean all the files, have to be presented to the judge.
Wow.
And the judge will go through them with a fine-tooth comb. Now, actually, it's delegated to a highly qualified barristers' counsel to do it for the judge or to help the judge. So that if anything's found that will help the defense, that must be put to defense. Well, of course, if you have an extremely secret piece of information that you held back from the defense, and that information is judged by the judge to have to go to the defense, you have to pull the prosecution, because you cannot risk that secret information being given to the opposition. So it's a very delicate, very cooperative system that goes on between the lawyers and the intelligence agents. And I'm not talking about just the law, I'm talking about the civil rights aspect as well. They all have to be right and tight and proper and respected.
And when you were doing the training with the agents, what was your sort of favorite part of that, the training? And if you can tell, like, what kind of a training you were sort of also like getting?
Yes. Well, first of all, one would go and have a look at the agents who would enter buildings and plant eavesdropping devices, and other agents other officers who were running intelligence agents. They're very impressive, because in order to secure a prosecution, and you send someone into a building, or someone is sent into a building, the lawyers don't do it, it's the operational officers. Not only do they have to go in and plant the bugs in very dangerous circumstances, but also they have to make a record of what they've done, so that when it gets to court, they can show the judge exactly how they planted the device.
Wow.
Yeah.
But how did they do that? So they need to take a picture or
immediately afterwards.
Wow. Because we don't see that in a James Bond movie.
No, exactly. And I look at James Bond and think, well, you're lucky. You don't have to. You're not having to think at the same time.
Because I think anyone from a public even thought about this. No. Like you're putting up bugging devices, and then you need to have some sort of a proof. But why do you need a proof? Because if you take that footage and take it to the judge, why do you need to show that you put this device?
The judge has to be satisfied that you put the device in there.
And you're not using someone else.
And you're not using someone else.
Wow.
That it's not some fake news.
Wow. And it's basically a process for every sort of operation?
Every operation where there's the possibility of a prosecution, certainly.